Yo, Philly, how you's doing? Welcome to Philadelphia Baseball, past, present, and personal. I'm Bill Kashatus, your host on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Today we're going to discuss a Philadelphia baseball legend, Dick Allen. Allen was the Phillies' first African-American superstar and the 1964 Rookie of the Year. Those who followed the Fightin' Phils in the 1960s will recall that Allen, who was known as Richie back then, forced Philadelphians to address the racism that existed in our city. His candid opinions challenged the white baseball establishment, while his tape measure home runs earned the admiration of young fans and teammates. Between 1964 and 1969, Allen averaged 30 homers and 90 RBI each season. And you have to remember that this was an era when pitching, not hitting, dominated the game. But Richie Allen was also the target of racist fans who discriminated by throwing their beer cans, coins, and batteries at him. He actually wore a batting helmet on the playing field to protect himself. It wasn't much better off the field for him either. Sports writers Larry Merchant, Stan Hochman, and Bill Conlon of the Daily News routinely baited Allen using the race issue. Unruly fans threw garbage on the front lawn of his Mount Airy home. Allen's life was so miserable that he pleaded with Phillies owner Bob Carpenter to trade him. At a time when free agency did not exist, a trade was his only hope to escape the nightmare. When Carpenter refused, Allen resorted to late arrivals, unexcused absences, and controversial press to force a trade to St. Louis after the 1969 season. But it was in Chicago, 2 years later, where Dick Allen found a home. In the Windy City, he captured 2 home run titles as well as the 1972 American League MVP award. In the process, Dick was embraced by White Sox fans and by the city itself. My guests are 2 of Allen's White Sox teammates, Hall of Famer Goose Gossage, who was a rookie pitcher in 1972, and third baseman Belton Bill Melton, who preceded Dick as the 1971 American League home run champion. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Bill, let's start with you. We know that Dick Allen's experience in Philadelphia compared to Chicago was night and day difference. And there was, my understanding, talk that the White Sox organization at the time, when Dick showed up in 1972, was financially and talent-wise in trouble. What exactly was going on in Chicago with the White Sox back in 72?
Well, that's a tough one to answer. I mean, now they call them rebuilds. We were doing the same thing, when Goose came up and stuff, and we had Forrester and a lot of young guys, Carlos May and myself, and, we call it a rebuild, but you had to do it through trades. It wasn't where you could go out and spend money and buy. I think the word was getting Dick Allen a little bit like they got Pudge with the White Sox when Jerry Reinsdorf bought the ball club. They went and got Carlton Fisk, and that kind of injected some enthusiasm in the fan base. And I would assume what they did with Dick Allen actually brought some enthusiasm to the fan base, because they were already working with a bunch of young guys and nobody knew who in the heck we were, but they sure knew and heard enough about Dick Allen. So, other than, we can go back to that era, and I can tell you right now, they talk about the White Sox not having money. The Cubs weren't drawing anybody. They had tarps on their upper decks like we've had tarps here. It's just a bad economic time for about everybody, except for, a few cities like New York and places like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, Bill, you had mentioned to me that, this was a pretty young team, and you were the AL home run champ the year before in 1971, and pretty much the club's premier power hitter. Now, how did you feel about Stu Holcomb, the general manager, acquiring Dick from the Dodgers? Was it being displaced, or how did you feel? Did you welcome him?
Yeah, it didn't mean a thing to me. I was glad to have another hitter aboard. You kidding? I think, when Goose could contest to this when you're a young ball club and you want a little more respect from other teams. We were just starting to get to the playing 500. We were way down below a couple of years earlier, losing over 100 games. But then when you get to about 500, and all of a sudden you get a Dick Allen, another bat in the lineup. Again, I mean, that's something to look forward to as a team, as a young team coming into the clubhouse. And now you've got a little recognition with a guy like Dick Allen. I thought it was very important for everybody. Can't say enough about Dick. I know Goose likes him. I liked him a lot. I think the whole team did. Pat Kelly, late Pat Kelly, everybody. He just, I don't know. I was kind of surprised he accepted the situation he was in, but he did, and he embraced it, and we all embraced him. And that's kind of all what he needed was just somebody wanting him to be in a certain place. And, he was there, and I think the city, they still talk about him today. I mean, Goose will contest. He leaves an impression on you no matter what side of the fence you are or how you think about him. There's an impression to Dick Allen, and I'm just still kind of disappointed he's not getting the recognition, for the Hall of Fame, because to me, a Hall of Famer is an impact player. They're spending too much time with numbers, where I think he was as dominant as anybody in the American League with Reggie Jackson and the rest of them. He just didn't play long enough or wasn't around enough to put up the big time numbers, but he was dominant. That to me is what a Hall of Fame player is. He's dominant in his era.
Now, Goose, you were a wide-eyed rookie in 1972, and here comes this guy Dick Allen. How did he treat you as a rookie?
Well, something I think that we're overlooking, Melty, is Chuck Tanner. The reason why he was probably with us, I don't remember really what the mechanics were. I was so young and just so happy to be in the big leagues at that time. I didn't know them. I didn't know anything. I was green behind the ears, but Chuck Tanner loved Dick Allen like his son, and they had a great rapport. And I believe that was why Chuck, being our manager, had a great influence on Dick coming over to Chicago. And really, I think Dick was pretty soured with the way he was treated in Philly and the way he was treated by people everywhere, really, and had I think a bad rap. He was one of the greatest teammates I ever had. I would have to say he's the greatest. He's the greatest player I ever saw play, and to see him do what he did in 1972, I never saw it accomplished after that. And I got to play with lots of great, and that's not to demean anybody else, but Dick Allen, he did it when, we used to call it damage. He had damage. I mean, he'd strike out 3 times, wouldn't he, Melty? And he would strike out 3 times with nobody on base. Then he'd come up late in the game with ducks on the pond, and man, they'd throw him that same slider that they struck him out 3 times on, and he would hit a frickin' rocket somewhere. It was like clockwork, and win games for us. And just for me to watch that, and then the greatest thing about Allen with me was he took me under his wing and taught me how to pitch from a great hitter's standpoint, location of fastballs and pitch selections. And then I had Johnny Sane teaching me my breaking ball, and Chuck Tanner as my manager. The stars were aligned. But Dick Allen, it was an education that all the money in the world couldn't pay for, Bill.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I forgot about not only Chuck Tanner was a big influence, allowing Dick to be who Dick was. Chuck never talked to any of us as players about how we needed to respect Dick Allen or anything. He just knew what Dick was, and we were just basically happy to have him aboard, another offensive player. I think another person that the late Joe Lynette was really good friends with Dick and kind of took care of him while Chuck was running the ball club. I know Lynette in spring training and stuff was taking care of Dick and trying to, go through the ropes, throwing him batting practice at 7 o'clock in the morning at Sarasota High School. None of us ever knew that or knew where he was. So I think it's a combination of Al Monchek, Chuck Tanner, the late Chuck Tanner, and of course, Joe Lynette. I would think Dick felt very comfortable with that. And then when he got with the players, he was just something special. I mean, to tell you what type of person he was, he wouldn't come out and take batting practice for about 5 weeks. And when we came back to Chicago, we were asking him one day when he walked out, we were kind of stunned, like, what's he doing taking batting practice? And the reason he never came out is he didn't want to take any of the press. He didn't want the press around him all the time and not talking to us. That's the way he thought. That was his thought pattern, that I want you guys to get the attention, not me.
Now both of you mentioned Lynette and Tanner, and I don't know if you know, but Tanner is from Newcastle, which is not far from where Dick grew up. The families, the Allen and Tanner families, knew each other, and Tanner was a major reason why Dick came to Chicago. In fact, he didn't want to go initially, and his mother, Dick's mother, Era, said, "Look, you go and help Chuck out. He's a good friend. You can help that team. He's asking you. He'll look out for you." And he did, because one of Dick's problems, particularly in St. Louis and in Los Angeles, was he never had a position. He was getting shifted between the different outfield positions and first base. But when he came to Chicago, it's my understanding that Tanner said, "Here's a first baseman's glove. Go there. It's yours. I'm just writing your name in the lineup." And Goose, maybe it was, you told me, or maybe it was you, Bill, that Dick was like a surrogate manager. He helped Chuck Tanner in many respects.
Well, a
young team.
I'll just elaborate on that. Dick is the smartest baseball man that I have ever been around, period. And I have been around some really, really brainiacs when it comes to baseball. And Dick Allen, he would tell you things that you would look at him and go, wow, and then it would happen. Like, it was the most amazing thing that I learned more baseball from Dick Allen, and what an education being a rookie and him taking me under his wing and telling me managing and how the game, what to look for and this and that, just the finer points of the game. And Melty, I think you said you were probably the guy to say he was like a surrogate manager.
Well, he was. I mean, everything he did was subtle. He never came up and told you anything straightforward, like you've got to do this, you should do that. It's more subtle. He'd always come up to me with a situation about, if I was struggling hitting and stuff. Dick would always have one little sharp quote, and then he'd open up those eyes of his, and all of a sudden it would hit you. And I think it did the same thing with George Orta. Between you, Goose, and George Orta, you were Dick's guys, believe me. And I mean, he loved George Orta. And again, everything was subtle. When you'd never said a thing when you were taking batting practice, even when you were struggling. But you'd walk inside, and you'd sit down for a second. He'd walk by and mumble about 5 words, and you'd have to sit there and think about what he just said. Because here's a guy that's done it all. I mean, we were in awe as players. You got to be kidding me! Some of the things he did.
Oh my God, the greatest base runner I ever saw. Yeah. I mean, Willie Wilson probably went from first to third faster than anybody I've ever seen, but Dick Allen was faster than, I think, Willie Wilson, because he cut bases. He knew how to do everything, and he knew how to coach it and teach it. And man, if you were a student, and it was just a marvel to sit there and watch him play. He didn't come out and take BP. Nobody cared. Just show up for the game, Dick. That's all we cared. We didn't care if we ever saw him, off the field or whatever. It was such an experience watching him play the game.
Yeah, let me try to visualize what you're saying. I was hitting behind him. When you talk about base running, he'd be on second base or somewhere, first base or something. He'd be coming around the bases, and all the way around, he would be looking to where the ball was. I rarely, ever, if I did it once in 5 years, put down the slide, because he would time the throw from the center fielder. he'd have his head looking at the center fielder, and when he knew what kind of arm the guy had and when he was going to throw it, you'd see the afterburners. He never slid into a catcher.
Wow.
And how about this one, Melty? When he'd hit a ball, somebody'd hit a ball into right field, and he's on first base. And he would look at that right fielder and play with him, and he would look around and watch. He'd be going from first to third, and he would just look back at that and see where the outfielder was with the ball, and then he'd turn on the afterburners, as Melty said, and slide in just ahead of the throw. I mean, like toy with people. It was the most amazing thing to see this guy and the things that he did on that. I never saw a guy. I played with McGuire. I played with lots of Reggie Jackson. I never saw anybody hit the ball as hard as Dick. And the home runs that he hit in Comiskey Park over the roof. And he hit a ball through the arches in the lower deck at Comiskey Park. There was a park back there, another baseball diamond, and a kids park back there. They found that thing all the way through that park. You can't even hit a fungo through there standing in where an outfielder stands. I mean, it takes and to hit a ball through there, and then the ball's in the bleachers. He almost hit a ball in the upper deck in right center field. Do you remember that, Melty?
Yeah.
In Comiskey Park, that just missed going on the roof in right center. You can't even imagine how far this is. And then in Detroit, hitting the balls he almost hit one completely out of the stadium in left center field over the bleachers in Tiger Stadium. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't a dead pull hitter, but I couldn't go to right center field in that old ballpark. The only thing that stands out for me with Dick, with the home runs, the two that stand out to me, there was only two people in the history of old Comiskey Park 100 years that ever hit a ball over the horns in dead center field into the bleachers. It was Alex Johnson with the Angels and Dick Allen. And it was 440. It was 440 to center field, and he hit it to the back bleachers over the horns. And it's just unbelievable. But you know what he took pride in? Knocking the shortstop down. He didn't want you to talk about
told me that, yeah.
And those mammoth shots and all that kind of stuff. He could care less. But if he knocked over a shortstop, he'd have the biggest smile on his face. Unbelievable.
Well, both of you gentlemen have told me before that he could do things at will. And the other thing that you mentioned was his loyalty to his teammates. And I've got a story I just want to recall. I know Bill remembers this, and I think it's actually a very funny story, but it captures both of those tendencies of Dick. Bill, I guess you had a herniated disc or back.
Yeah, 2 ruptured discs.
In 72. And Harry Carey, who started his broadcasting career with the White Sox, was one of your harshest critics. Here you're trying to play through an injury and giving it everything, and he's busting you on the radio time and time again. And Dick didn't appreciate it. So one afternoon, he slams a rocket, and you know how his home runs went. They just took off like line drives, and it kept rising and rising and rising and rising. And that ball is headed right into the center field bleachers where Carey was broadcasting the game from. And all of a sudden, he didn't figure that ball was going to come around him. His fishnet, his trademark fishnet, goes one direction, the beer goes the other, and he hits the ground. And Alan had told me once before, he says, I had my teammates back. I didn't like what Carey was saying about him. Now, could he actually do something like that? Could he hit a home run at will, let alone hit something like that?
Hey, I'll just tell you this. Every time I saw him knocked down by a pitcher, which somebody got crazy enough to even think about, you leave a sleeping dog lie. Let me tell you, every time I saw him and guys tried to intimidate him, it was like he got up. And I'll tell you what, it was like, you better tie your ass down to this mound because you better get ready because there's going to be a rocket, a missile coming back at you. I mean, he tried to kill. He undressed pitchers. Every time they undressed him, he undressed them. Next pitch. It was amazing. Yes, that doesn't surprise me what he did.
Yeah, one thought
called it.
I remember, we were talking about Dick. One time we were in Old Comiskey Park, and Nolan Ryan was on the mound with a no-hitter. And Dick's on the on-deck circle, and I'm walking up there, and he comes back to put some rosin or something down, and he goes, and it's a no-hitter. Ryan, I think, struck out about 14 or 15 guys. And he just kind of looked up at me. He says, "It ain't going to happen." He went up there and hit a ball right back through him, and almost broke his leg.
Oh, my God.
It was a no-hitter to us. There's a line drive right back up the middle. I went, whoa, it ain't that easy. But that was
how about that night in hey, Melty, how about that night in Cleveland? You know, Dick had a knack, and he did it real fancy. After the third out, he'd turn around, flip the ball, kind of cool, in a cool manner to the umpire at first base on the third out. And
one out.
there was one out, and a ball was hit, and somebody threw the guy out to Dick, and Dick turned around and tossed the ball to the umpire, and 2 runs scored. And Dick was so embarrassed. He came back in the dugout and he threw his glove down. And he said he didn't throw it hard, just kind of tossed it down in disgust, And he goes, I can't believe I did that, guys. He goes, I am so sorry. And he was so apologetic and so sorry and so embarrassed. He says, but he looks at us, he goes, I'm going to get him back. In the 8th inning, he hit a 3-run homer to win the game for us.
Jeez. So what you're telling me is he could have had more than 351 home runs if he wanted to play that kind of game.
Let me tell you, he hit home runs when he wanted to hit home runs. Wow. He did everything when he wanted, and when he wanted to do it, he's the greatest player I ever saw play. I didn't see Clemente. I didn't play with Clemente, but I'll tell you what, I can't imagine a man doing what this man did in 1972 when his attitude was good and when he wanted to. We had no business chasing Oakland. Those were great teams, and we got on Dick's back and we rode him, man. And he had a great supporting cast. Melty, if you'd have been healthy that year, we would have won it, I believe. Mm-hmm. And Carlos May, we had a good supporting cast. George Orta, we had a good hitting ball club, but Dick just put us on his back, and it was the most amazing thing I've ever had the privilege of watching.
Well, they gave him the MVP trophy. Must have been something right.
Yeah. that next year, 1973, Holcomb.
We were better.
Wanting to get that elusive pennant, acquired Ken Henderson from the Giants, and then Tanner hit Henderson third, Dick hit cleanup, and Bill, you protected him. You hit fifth. And it was also the first year of the designated hitter. But, Bill, maybe you told me, Dick, he was 32 years of age at that time. He probably might have benefited by filling that role, but he didn't want to DH. Why?
He didn't think that was part of the game. It's the same thing sometimes when he took days off. I remember one great line. He came Goose like this when we were in Minnesota, and Chuck wanted to give him a day off because of the AstroTurf, and he kind of agreed and said, if a horse can't eat it, I don't want to play on it. He started that.
Right.
That following year you're talking about when Dick broke his leg, we were 4 games up on Oakland in August. So in 72, we gave him a push. In 73, we actually had the lead in August going into Anaheim. I made a mistake and threw a high throw, and Mike Epstein put his shoulder down and broke Dick's leg, and that took us out of it. But we had about 2 or 3 really good teams. Again, I think all of us got along. It didn't make any difference.
Yeah, that's the thing. People here still in Philadelphia, so many of us who know him, and have a deep affection for him. We still consider him an enigma because the only thing that's predictable about Dick is his unpredictability. And, we've talked about this before. Dick could have played longer. He probably could have played longer in Chicago. In fact, he ruptured that Achilles tendon in mid-September of 1974, and I guess at that point, Roland Heeman was the manager. He just said, "Well, there's no use. We're out of the chase now. Go home." And he still won the AL home run title that year, and he didn't even play the last 2 weeks of the season. But here's this personality. And we've talked about this before, that he's not going to put up with any kind of garbage. He doesn't want the limelight. If he's going to retire, he's going to retire. He doesn't really care what the sports writers say. He's going to lead his own life. And a lot of people they don't get that. They don't understand that. Especially today, when there's so much money riding, and player contracts and everything else. It just didn't seem that, in the end, any of that stuff mattered to him. And people can't understand that about him. And yet it's what endeared him to so many people I know in Philadelphia, second time around especially. Did you see that same personality in Chicago?
I think it just, Go ahead, Goose.
I'll tell you, Dick was a no-nonsense guy. When we were in that dugout, I saw him tell guys, "Hey, watch the game and learn something." Man, everybody, you could hear a pin drop. And he was a no BS. I mean, there wasn't an ounce of bullshit in Dick. And that's what he hated, was bullshit. And that's what he didn't like about the game. He'd like to come in and just, do his thing and not have to take BP, but it's not because it's like Melty said. He didn't like the limelight. He loved the game of baseball, but he hated the stuff that went with it. And, we put up with it. We tolerated it. It's part of the game. But Dick just, he marched to the beat of a different drum, and an honest guy, and I mean, the most honest guy you will ever want to meet. And he called a spade, and bullshit. And that was what got him in hot water, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Gave him that, that everybody, Dick Allen, and
bad boy baseball,
it's the furthest from the way Dick Allen is what everybody has perceived.
Right.
Yeah, he had a mystique about himself that, again, I talked to the late Moose Cowan, one of your buddies, Goose. Moose, I used to talk to Moose about some of the old Yankee players, and he talked about Joe DiMaggio, which he really didn't get along with. And he said, man, he just had a lot of problems with Joe DiMaggio. But he said, you know what, Bill, when he walked in the clubhouse with that suit and that tie on, the whole place would go completely quiet.
Wow.
Because he was the man. And I feel the same way about Dick. When he walked in them long, funky coats he used to have, when he walked in the club at 7 o'clock or quarter till, looking to punch Pat Kelly out, I mean, he just stood there and the way he dressed was like, he was the man. He just walked. We were all waiting for him to come in. So almost the same thing with, not like, great DiMaggio, but that comparison, because Moose, those Yankee teams were great. And, I guess DiMaggio was the man.
Do you think he could have managed? Do you think Allen could have managed?
No.
Oh, my God.
No. Try to get him to fill out a lineup card? No, I don't think so.
No? Well,
you mean in the sense of, was he smart enough to manage?
Yeah, he had the act.
Oh my God, I'm telling you, he had a different perspective of baseball altogether. When he talked, it was like you just sit there with your mouth open going and just listening to what came out of his mouth about the game of baseball. It was incredible. About pitching, about everything. He was, like I said, he's the smartest baseball man. And Chuck Tanner used to tell me that too. You know, I'd like to say something. One of the coolest things, if not the coolest thing besides me going in to the Hall of Fame, was we have a golf outing, and I was playing in the golf outing. We play with sponsors, and that year of my election, I'm playing golf, and we finished the golf round, and then that afternoon we go to the induction ceremonies of the next day is the big induction or the players induction and the other people, you know, that are going into the hall, but the riders and stuff like that, it was that afternoon. Well, then I'm just getting ready to leave the clubhouse and at the golf club, and somebody said, "Hey, Goose, somebody outside wants to see you." And I said, "Okay," and I hurried out there. I was in a rush, and I hurried out the front door, and my God Almighty, who was there but Chuck Tanner and Dick Allen?
Wow.
To just say hi. And wow. Dick drove Chuck up there from Pennsylvania, and it's so touching and it's the greatest thing that happened to me in my induction ceremony. And for Chuck, and Chuck had just gotten out of the hospital. He had some health issues, and I just, to this day, I still shake my head. And they drove all that way up there to just congratulate me is all, and they turned right around and drove back to Pennsylvania.
You know, that's an 8-hour drive. It's probably actually a little bit more. I mean, and that's
tell me about it.
That's the kind of guy Dick is, and people don't know that.
And it was the kind of guy that Chuck was, and that was kind of their relationship. And I just love those guys like I love anybody in my family. And just what an experience.
All right.
Well, they were proud of you. You know, you accomplished a lot. So, you know, when you're a young kid, you come up and you pitch for the White Sox, and all of a sudden you with the Yankees here in the Hall of Fame. I mean, these guys are behind you like a lot of us were. I wasn't going to make that drive from California, but
gentlemen, we're almost out of time, but please indulge me on this, because a lot of our listeners really don't know the kind of numbers that Dick put up. And I just want to quickly review them here. At the end of his playing career, Dick had a career batting average of .292, 350 home runs, 1,119 RBIs. He won 2 major awards, the Rookie of the Year in '64, the MVP in 1972. He appeared in 7 All-Star games. He won 2 home run titles and an RBI title. And now the new metrics, sabermetrics, reveal that Dick boasted a 156 OPS plus, that's on-base plus slugging percentage adjusted, which ranks him 20th of all time, and a 69.9 offensive WAR, wins above placement, ranking him 61st of all time. Now, having said that, the baseball writers never gave him more than 18.9% of the vote. But in 2014, 3 years ago, when the Veterans Committee considered his candidacy, Dick fell 1 vote short of being elected. Gentlemen, in your estimation, is Dick Allen a Hall of Famer?
Well, I'll start out by saying my qualifications for a Hall of Famer is a guy that, you know, you accumulate enough years, you're eventually going to have the numbers to be a Hall of Famer, 3,000 hits, X amount of home runs, and on and on. But I just think, to me, it's always been how dominant were you in the era you played, whether it's a 10-year period or a 15-year period. How dominant were you over other players? To me, that's a Hall of Famer. That's the one I think you should be judged against or get consideration from against your peers. Can't go back to, you know, when Mickey Mantle played and all of them, but against your peers, I thought Dick was as good as anybody in baseball, hitting-wise, running, you name it, driving in big runs like Goose said. So to me, you know, I have to put him in the Hall of Fame. You know, they can go ahead and squabble about that 350 home runs, this and that, but I bet you he did it in a shorter period of time than anybody.
Mm-hmm. Goose?
Yep, and the shorter period of time, and just that he did it when it counted. All of those statistics that he has are what we call as players damage, serious damage. And they won games, and this is the kind of thing, remember this, Dick, or Melty, that Dick would get the lead. He'd hit a home run, get the lead, he goes, okay, boys, I'm out of here. He goes, bring it on home.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did.
And you know what? We didn't care. We didn't care. We were gonna, we were gonna win the game because, but that's the way he was. And if he just wanted to put up sheer numbers, it's scary what this guy, if he just went up there and padded numbers and padded his statistics like guys do, Dick took himself out of games when the game was a blowout. Dick was gone in the fifth inning. If it was 10-2 or something like that, Dick was gone. He didn't want to play. He was done. The game's over. This ain't no fun.
I tell you,
that's not a knock against Dick. That's just how talented he was. Incredible.
Well,
yes, absolutely belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
oh my God!
Really, sabermetrics is showing us how good he really was. I'm not big on sabermetrics, but if you can go back and use them now, they thought that would be against him. But guess what? It's not against him; it's for him.
You're right.
So absolutely, Melty. Great point.
It has enhanced his candidacy beyond what anybody would have thought. It really has.
All right, Goose, go back and milk your cows.
Yep.
Some things never change.
You know those stupid things they made of us running around the park, and those big goofy things they had, like the sausages and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I beat you in every one of those races. They just gave me credit. I had to let you know now. That's what happened. 12 races.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks, Billy. Great.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, always a pleasure talking about Dick, man.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
All right, Bill. See you, Melty.
See you, Goose.
Okay.
See you, buddy.
See ya. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another podcast of Philadelphia Baseball, past, present, and personal. I'm Bill Kashatus, rounding third and heading home on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.